You know, if there's one question I get asked more than any other, more even than if you could remove one colour from the world forever, which would it be? That question would have to be, Mark, is Nikon's 28mm f2.8 for the Z system a perfect balance of focal length, price and performance, or is it just a yawn fest of a lens that'll take an okay picture, but you'd be too bored to care? Well, today we're going to try and answer that question. And don't worry, we'll be getting on to which colour needs to be obliterated from the Pantone pantheon. I promise you that. Now, one of my habits when I visit a new country is to take a look around the second-hand camera scene in the hope of picking up a bargain as a travel souvenir. Let's face it, I'm going to get a lot more use out of a new piece of camera kit when I get home than any novelty fridge magnet. Well, I was in Shanghai and I'd heard about this mythical place where fairies frolic in streams and unicorns flick their manes as they bound over beautiful green pastures. Or, more literally, a large multi-story mall inhabited by small camera shops that deal in second-hand photographic equipment. I had 1,000 renminbi burning a hole in my WeChat wallet, and I wanted to treat myself to some exotic glass as a keepsake from China. Well, since that kind of budget doesn't actually stretch to exotic though, I figured I'd just settle for something that was practical and actually useful. Yes, you've read the title and you know where this video is going. I had my Nikon film and digital mirrorless cameras with me, and my thoughts were turning to a medium telephoto like the manual focus 135mm f2.8, or something at the budget end of the Z line, where the lens comes wrapped in a sweaty loincloth rather than a case, and the mount is made of plastic. Actually, just about every Nikon camera these days, or even lens, comes with a microfiber cloth more suited to wiping down your car window than protecting a lens. But I digress. Xinguang Photographic Equipment City is a multi-story plaza, if your definition of a plaza is a tired shopping centre in the Huangpu district of Shanghai, just 10 minutes walk away from Dapoqiao station. You start out on the ground floor among the more salubrious showrooms of name-brand modern digital equipment. As you ascend the escalators, the price and quality of the shops diminishes, and the equipment cabinets become more crammed and disorganized. The air thins, oxygen replaced by the wispy blue cigarette smoke of the predominantly male shopkeepers playing Honor of Kings on their phones. Whatever you wanted, Xinguang Camera Market seemed to have it. I saw Fujis, I saw Canons, I saw more Leicas than you'd find at a dentist convention. And of course, lots and lots of Nikons. So many Nikon 50mm f1.8Ds still in production, which is probably indicative of the popularity and number of lenses that have been produced over the years rather than its status as a low-rent nifty 50. Still, it was actually quite sad to see these homeless children, and of course I wanted to adopt them all, but I couldn't.
请问135多少钱 Okay, 谢谢。
And after discovering that the 135mm was a little bit pricey, I set my sights even more modestly. Below the shelf of unloved F-mount dust bunnies, I found what I was looking for, at least approximately.
请问多少钱
There are two compact wide-angle lenses in the Nikon Z lineup, the muffin-sized 28mm and the even more diminutive pancake 26mm. $2,700.
2700
Yeah.
And the 28
28.
this one 这个 2700.
Now the 26mm comes in at a higher cost than the 28, about 580 Australian dollars compared to 260.
1200.
By all accounts, the optical quality difference is small compared to the difference in size and build quality, so that's quite a luxury tax. Since the grip of my Z6 is already pretty chunky, I figured that size and build benefit was really minimal with a 26. But really that 28mm is such a bland looking lens. In the end, I did find what I was really looking for, the SE version of the 28mm that was released to accompany the Nikon Retro ZF series, and it has a design aesthetic that harks back to the halcyon days of Nikon's manual lenses.
能看吗？
Yeah. 银色的吗？啊？是不是银色的？
谢谢。
问了你半天，你。
你保证吗？
保证。
保证。多少时间
3个月。
3个月。
At the equivalent of around 220 Australian dollars, that's actually cheaper than the regular version, and maybe I could kid myself that this was something a bit special if I didn't look at it too closely.
谢谢。Okay.
I've got to say that the shopkeepers were really friendly, indulging me practicing my terrible Chinese on them.
你是哪个国家的？
我是澳大利亚人。
澳大利亚。
Yeah. 澳洲。Yeah. 西澳洲。
澳洲的这个东西应该便宜，比中国便宜啊。
比中国便宜不太便宜。
差不多啊。
差不多。有些便宜，有些。
I very nearly embarrassed myself when I realized that my WeChat had a 1,000 yuan transaction limit, but fortunately Alipay came to the rescue. And here it is. Nikon's 28mm Z f2.8. I mean, it actually looks quite pretty. But a close inspection will disabuse you of any notion that this is a premium product, with its plastic mount and front element that looks like it's taken from a 1990s point and shoot. That's disappointing in and of itself, but that's not the main reason why I'm here with the provocation that it's Nikon's most boring lens. I think a lot of that has to do with the actual focal length. There are those that love the 28mm field of view. The ultimate man in the crowd, Gary Winogrand, used a 28 to document the chaotic streets of New York to great effect. Well, I'm the grandest wino I know, certainly more of a wino than a winner. Let's call him Winogrand because then I feel ultimately and eminently qualified to analyse the merits of this focal length. If we cast our mind back to the dark ages of film, 28mm was considered as wide as it got before you broached the super wide length of 24mm, with everything wider than that being considered exotic ultra-wides. The world has moved on since then though. It used to be that 35mm was considered the most boring focal length.
But let's put the worst focal length of all time, Jordan.
Oh, I have an objective.
I'm going to go with 35mm. What? Yes, it's absolutely the worst focal length of all time. I mean, anything a 35mm can do, Jordan, a 28mm can do better.
The documentary realism of 35mm was great to capture a broad environmental perspective without the distortion that comes from going wider. But really, it's, well, mundane. And now I'd argue that 28 is the new 35. These days, even the most modest standard zooms start at 24. And let's face it, most people post their Instagram photos using something like this phone. Do the maths on the tiny sensor on your smartphone and you'll realize that the vast majority have an equivalent focal length somewhere between 26 and 30mm in 35mm terms. Bearing in mind, Deloitte claims that 90% of the trillions of photos posted online are taken with a phone, then our pictorial world is saturated with 28mm images. All those Instagram posts of food, pets, and travel are the bland visual fodder of the internet that we mindlessly consume and have become our default way of looking at the world. So, Sorry, 28mm, but you are the boring uncle at the wedding. We've heard all your stories before, and you have nothing to add to the party as you shuffle your way through the Macarena and stare down the tops of bridesmaids. Or am I being too harsh here? Well, I needed to test this lens out. And what better way to do so than to take it to Zhujiajiao, an ancient water town on the outskirts of Shanghai, dating back 1700 years, with the architecture coming from the Ming and Qing dynasties. That's nearly as old as my jokes, and a lot older than this lens. But let's try out this wide but not too wide lens on the wide but not too wide streets and canals of this ancient town, and see if I can coax an interesting photo from it. So there you go. No masterpieces perhaps, and if I'm going to be honest, when I first downloaded the images, I was a little bit disappointed. Really, how many pictures of water taxis cruising up and down the canals do you need? Like gondolas in Venice, we've probably seen those shots far too many times, and so like the 28mm lens itself, it suffers from that overfamiliarity. Is that a problem of the lens though? Or is it an issue with the photographer? Either my own inability to elevate myself from the cliched tourist shots, or simply that that's what was constantly being presented to me in the viewfinder through that 28mm field of view. I did find that as the weather turned rainy, the lack of weather sealing and my frustration with the lack of reach meant that I did end up reverting back to my standard travel lens, the 24 to 200mm. That has got me shots like this. And this, some of my favourites from the shoot. But what I did notice when I was reviewing the photos was, well, the 28 may not have always got me that perfectly composed shot, but when I looked at the actual image quality, there was a crispness about those photos that I found intriguing. In fact, while I've always been quite happy with the 24 to 200, there's kind of a smudginess to the images when reviewed close up that has given me pause. I used it in Thamestown in a previous video to great effect, and click here if you want to see my voyage through the uncanny valley of a Chinese concept of an English village. Of course, a lot of that could be camera movement through poor technique, but now I compare them directly, there does seem to be that little bit of extra bite to the 28mm. But how good is it really? Well, let's get forensic on this little lens and compare it to what is probably its closest rival, other than the more expensive 26mm, at least in terms of being able to get to that 28mm focal length in a compact size. And it's this Nikon 24 to 50mm f4 to 6.3. Equally cheap and cheerful, and purchased for a bargain price that I assume is a result of someone desperate to ditch it after it came as a kit lens on their new toy. Its build quality and ability to get to 28mm make it a good contender, even if it has a measly zoom and an even stingier widest aperture. So we're not really comparing like for like here, but let's see how we got on. Using a set of encyclopedia as our model for this shoot, it was a quick case of setting it up on a tripod, dialing in 100 ISO and a consistent white balance. Then letting the exposure do its thing as I take the photos, stopping down the aperture as we go. Firstly, the 24 to 50mm, followed by the 28mm f2.8. Looking at the results, and on first impression they're quite comparable. In all cases the zoom is on the left and the 28mm is on the right. Looking at both wide open, it's not really a fair fight. The biggest issue of the zoom lens is that at its widest it's f4, and once you zoom in to 28mm, that's already f4.5, not a low light beast. It's not surprising then that at the center the f2.8 lens is a tiny bit softer, though there really isn't much in it. Both are quite good, with reasonably sharp edges around the text without ghosting, and a sense of the texture of the book cover coming through. Look to the corners and it's clear you're seeing some of the softness of that f2.8 showing through, with a 28mm on the right a bit darker, lacking in contrast and not really quite as sharp. It's a similar story on the right bottom corner too, so let's give it to the zoom wide open. Kind of inevitable really, given how much we're already stopped down. It gets more interesting at f3.5 though, with the 28mm on the right again, with the zoom still on the left, and still at its widest aperture of f4.5. Now there's nothing really to choose between them at the center. Maybe the zoom has the edge, but it's a tough call. Looking at that beautiful PVC 1970s record box, then that elegant embossing looks very similar. Maybe at the absolute corner you can give it up to the zoom, but still a close contest. Stop the 28mm down to f4, and it's still close, but this time I am giving it to the 28mm. The corners are a little bit better too, perhaps a little bit sharper, closer to the center than at the extreme edge. And look, I might just be nitpicking now. Let's bear in mind that the f4 of the 28mm is still a tiny bit more open than the zoom on the left too. It's when you stop it down further that things really start to get interesting. It's not that the 28mm gets much sharper as you stop it down. Honestly, after f4 going down to f11, you're getting remarkably similar results. It's only at f16 that you really start to notice a bit of softness due to diffraction. The same is true in the corner, with the fall off gone by f5.6 and a good result until that f16. The zoom, it's weird though. Normally lenses get a bit sharper as they stop down, but this little optic, it gets softer and softer. Even f8 is noticeably weaker than f5.6. One interesting feature of the zoom is that you can actually stop it all the way down to f25. But honestly, its best results are wide open. Actually, I'd say they're both at their best around f4 or f4.5. Any concerns about the 28mm vignetting is gone by f4, and while the corners are arguably softer than the zoom at the widest aperture, I'm still surprised how well it performs, even at f2.8. This is one of those lenses where it corrects everything in camera. So look, you won't notice any distortion. I also, try as I might, couldn't get it to throw off any purple or green fringing due to chromatic aberration. It handles flaring well too, particularly for a cheaper wide-angle lens, though if you stop it down, you do run the risk of coming off a bit like a J.J. Abrams Star Trek reboot. Actually, the real surprise here is the 24 to 50mm zoom. You'd expect some flaring from a zoom lens, and yes, it does exhibit more than the 28, but it's still quite well controlled, and if you stop it down to f25, you get quite cool sunstars. Maybe not the best of the best, but a lot better than the 28mm, which really just creates a mushy halo. Overall, the 28mm is just a classier lens though. It doesn't require you to unlock it before you can shoot, and it focuses smoothly and quietly. One useful feature for me in a wide-angle lens is the ability to focus closely. This one focuses closer than the zoom at 28mm, so good job there. And when you do focus close, one final trick up the 28mm sleeve is how it handles the out of focus areas. The bokeh is creamy and soft, confident, but not in your face. You're never going to get that background obliterated with a 28mm lens, but this handles the out of focus areas with aplomb. No hint of nervousness or discomfort, the focus just falls away gently, drawing your attention to your subject. I won't even bother comparing it to the zoom because f4.5 is really just snapshot territory on a lens this wide. Just be grateful for those small aperture sunstars. Look, the 28mm f2.8 lens isn't perfect by any means, and for me, one of the greatest imperfections is that focal length itself. 28mm is boring. I got some good shots, but as a group looking through them, it just feels like flicking through your phone library. The 24 to 200 gave me much more versatility. I was able to provide close-ups and context. I could use the longer focal length to add some variety, but also exclude some distracting elements in the frame. Wide-angle lenses, they can be hard to compose with, and while the 28 is by no means an extreme angle, I do have to be a bit more conscious of my composition on the streets, well, certainly more than I do with a 35 or 50. Selecting my best half dozen, I managed to pick a few periwinkles from the weedy pictorial seabed. These are the ones that best managed to capture something of the place for me without looking too much like postcards. Not that it was a particularly postcardy kind of day. The light was dim and had a tendency to drain the colour from the scene. Some of these pictures arguably worked better in black and white. Speaking of colour though, my favourite shots were actually taken with this, my Canon SureShot 120 Classic. It's just a film point and shoot, using Delta 400 pushed to 800 in this case. In many ways, the gritty black and white film suited the lighting and the aging splendour of Zhujiajiao best of all. And still on the theme of colour, if there is one colour in the world that should be obliterated from the world, then maybe that colour should be brown. More specifically, Pantone 448C, officially described as drab dark brown. Even objective sites like Wikipedia describe it as the ugliest color, referencing the market research that has found it to be the least attractive color in the world. It's also the reason why it was selected as the plain paper packaging color for cigarettes in Australia. So is the Nikon Z 28mm f2.8 the Pantone 448C of the lens world? Well, the SE version of the Nikon 28mm Z is certainly not ugly. In fact, I quite like how it looks. It reminds me a little bit of the 28mm E-series manual focus lens, but its build quality doesn't inspire confidence and the 28mm focal length is familiar. Boring? You be the judge, but since you've lasted to the end of this video, maybe your own judgment is actually quite questionable. Let's capitalize on your foolishness. Like, share, subscribe, and comment before you come to your senses and realize you've actually spent a big chunk of time comparing photos of books. For me, this is a great 28mm lens, albeit it is a 28mm. It's small, it's sharp, it's fun. Not every shot it produced was the photographic equivalent of Pantone 448C, and honestly, since I first got it, it's actually produced some great night street shots that have ensured it will have a place in my camera bag. But hey, that's another story for another time. Later.